Good afternoon and welcome to the latest issue of Print21, the weekly video news bulletin for the Australia and New Zealand print industries. This issue is sponsored by Ball & Docker, Australia's largest supplier of printable materials and press room consumables. The week in print has been dominated by two massive stories, both with a 2-into-1 theme, as the big industry associations PVCA and TRMC merge, and as IVE succeeds with its bid to buy stricken Ovato. Firstly to IVE, it will buy its one-time rival Ovato, or more correctly the heatset business, with the ACCC giving the green light to the $16 million deal for its stricken competitor. Jeff Selig, executive chairman of IVE, said it's expected the acquisition will complete within 2 weeks now. The ACCC concluded that the only options for Ovato were either acquisition by IVE or liquidation. As with no other bidders and the parlous state of its finances, Ovato met the failing firm criteria, and that effectively enabled the ACCC to greenlight the deal that will see the vast majority of heatset capacity in Australia under the one IVE banner. The deal only includes the New South Wales and West Australia plants. The Warwick Farm site, in fact the 7-Web super site, that will only be kept open for 18 months to enable all the work that's printed there to be transitioned to IVE plants in Melbourne and Sydney. The West Australia plant, Bibra Lakes, that will be kept open long term. The fate though of the Geebung heatset plant in Brisbane looks bleak, as does the future for the sheep-fed plants in Cairns and in Auckland. None are part of the IVE deal. IVE's been spending the week since the ACCC gave the green light briefing to Ovato, briefing Ovato staff on their future prospects. Current annual revenues that the Ovato Australia Wellbus printing operation are estimated to be around $160 million. IVE says the acquisition is expected to be accretive in the current financial year. It will fund the acquisition from its $67 million cash reserve. The deal, if okayed by the deal, and now it's been okayed by the ACCC, marks the end of a 30-year story for Ovato, originally spun out of Rupert Murdoch's empire as PMP when he was desperate for cash 30 years ago. And it sees the vision of the 7-Web super site in Warwick Farm, open to great fanfare just 3 years ago, turned to dust. It also marks the final chapter in the 90-year story of the Hannon family's involvement in print, which saw them develop a powerhouse printing group with both sheet-fed and heat-set businesses. Its merger as IPMG with PMP, however, spelt disaster, with the share price plummeting, $430 million worth of losses over 5 years, and now seeing the administrators sell the once mighty business to its biggest rival and for less than the price of one of its Warwick Farm presses. Australia's heat-set print sector will now be largely owned by IVE following the deal. Both major heat-set product lines, magazines and catalogues, of course, have been in decline, but still represent a sector worth several $100 million a year, most of which, or almost all of which, now can be done by IVE. And in suffering for the industry, though, there was some really good news, with the merger between the industry's big two associations, PVCA and TRMC, now complete. A new board appointed, IVE CEO Matt Aitken, the first president of the new super body. With the widespread support of the industry, the Print and Visual Communication Association of Australia, PVCA, in its new guise, held its first merged board meeting. It voted in the new office members. It prepared a strategy to move forward as a united industry body. All good news. As I said, Matt Aitken was voted in as the president of the new entity. John Gorgon-Zacks, the managing director of Spot Press, is the new deputy president. Rodney Frost, CEO of Lamson Group, honorary treasurer. Stuart Fish from the Label Factory, he'll retain his role, which had as previously PVCA, as honorary secretary. Former President Walter Coon will remain on the board as a board officer, with Simon Carmody, managing director of Spot Productions, Tom Eckersley, managing director of the Eckersley Print Group, Kevin Pigeon, executive chairman of Lithocraft down there in Melbourne, and Nick Tuitt, managing director of Quick Copy. The Quick Copy is a circular key in North Sydney, forming the remainder of the board. The first meeting of the board, it marked the start, we can say, of a new era in the print industry, with print businesses now represented by one voice. Coming together as one board and one industry body now brings opportunities, says Matt Aitken, to be forward-focused with a strategy to unite and strengthen the entire industry and its position, output and representation. That was Matt Aitken's first comments as president. Other big news of the week was Agfa selling its Offset Solutions division to Aurelius. We haven't heard of it, it's a Luxembourg-based investment group, sold for €92 million. There'll be no change in supply though, with Agfa Oceania continuing to distribute the products here. The Offset Solutions business, which comprises plates, workflow, software, CTP, chemicals, films, and the proofing technology, was Agfa's biggest division. Sales €748 million last year. Adjusted EBITDA loss came down from €22 million to €6 million, and for the first 2 quarters this year, it was back in the black. Mark Brindley, Managing Director of Agfa Graphic Oceania, hailed the deal as good news, telling me that Aurelius is committed to following the strategy Agfa has for the next 5 to 7 years. Brindley says he spoke to Frederick Daying last night, who was his predecessor, of course, well known in these parts as its head of Agfa ANZ, now Agfa Vice President Europe. Daying saying he was very positive about the new owners. He said they bought the business to grow it. For print businesses in Australia and New Zealand who are supplied by Agfa, and of course there's many of them, as I said, there'll be no change to the current arrangements. Brindley saying Agfa will be supplying the offset solutions for the foreseeable future. And in fact, we'll be working closely with Aurelius. He said, for instance, the workflow for the wide format print systems, which Agfa will continue to manufacture, there'll be close cooperation on the development of those. That's it for this week's issue of Print21. For all these stories in full and more, go to print21.com.au. Thanks to our sponsor, Ball & Doggett. This is Wayne Robinson, outside some terrific graphics, signing off for another week.